What's up guys? Jordan from Bennett's Customs. We're back on another episode. What I'd like to do is just show you a couple simple techniques on what I do in order to blend my welds. And by blending, I mean we're trying to eliminate them or make them follow a radius that we are trying to match or smoothing them out. The biggest one that you guys have asked about, and we really want to cover it, is this square little sanding disc that you see on here. And this is not traditionally square. They are round, very much like this. I do not take credit for this either. I saw it on Jason Fair's. He explained it once and cut them, and it was like, it blew my mind because of how simple it is, but how well it actually works. I want to explain why I would use this over using this in certain areas and how much easier it is to do. So let's get into the video. What I have is a little bit of material here, and all we're gonna do is weld these two pieces to it. I'm gonna use silicon bronze as well. This is great for like non-structural stuff. It's softer material, so for blending it helps a lot. But this stuff is awesome if you're doing, you know, like neck fillers or blending something on a fuel tank or whatever you're trying to do. This stuff works really well. So I'm gonna explain, you know, using it. It also burns at a lower temperature. So if you're using small sheet metal and you wanted to weld something onto it, without distorting it too much, and if you didn't have access to being able to get to the back to planish it out, you could definitely use this stuff, again, if it's non-structural stuff. I also love using this thing too. This is the SB Tools finger grinder, I believe they're called, and I actually use it in a kind of a weird way. There's like a little spot in here that's kind of got a little bit of tension on it, but it's not hard on the actual end, and so it's a little bit more kind to want to blend a little bit of a weld. It kind of lets the belt do it rather than the actual wheel. So I'll show you a little bit of that use as well, and then I'm just, you know, we'll show you different variations of projects that we've obviously used this technique. We are just going to tack this into place. We are using a 2.4 tungsten in there at the moment, with a little bit thicker. I believe this is 1.6. It's definitely not 1.6, it's 2 mil.
Rivers winding round words in my head. Shivering pines say that summer is dead. Chest feels hollow and my hands are numb.
And what I'd like to do on one, actually, I'm just gonna divide this in half and just do a couple more passes just to build it up a bit more, to show you how you can knock a bit more weld down. So obviously you can see that one's gonna be really nice and clean because we got an even amount of gas distribution through it. And then this one's kind of dirty because we've done multiple passes over. I'm gonna do the other side exact same so that we can show you the difference between using the different sanding discs and what they do and how fast it does it. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to explain a couple of things. Your backing pads that you can get for these, you can get them in all different thicknesses, but you can also get them in like different grades of flexibility for them. So this one is definitely their more firm one versus the other one that I have here. If I take this disc off, I can show you, it's got a ton more flex. So if you're looking to bevel a corner, obviously this one being really hard is gonna give you a really hard edge. So it's not gonna be as good as using one more like this. Now, if we were to go into, say, the one I use on here, this one is a 2-inch one that I think I've even sanded it down even more. And this one's really, really, really soft because it allows me, it creates that contour, right? So if you press this up against an edge, it's gonna create that little flex, and that's what you want. So again, I explained, I always use the 3-inch ones. I never buy the 2-inch ones. Why? Because these work great for when you want to use them for, you know, if you were just trying to knock down a weld or something like that. If I had just TIG weld a big insert or anything, or a panel, a rust panel that we've done on an early car, then yeah, I would love to use this just to knock the weld off before I start planishing it out. These work perfect for it. But the thing is once they burn that edge off, they're sort of useless. You don't really use a lot of the center part of it. So I always keep them. I throw them in a little ice cream tray that I got, and they're just used ones that are, you know, worn out. But as soon as you go and take your scissors and you grab it and you cut and make your square, you now have brand new edges. So you can use them more. So again, as well, like the 3M ones, the Cubitron ones of these, I personally feel that they last a lot longer. They are definitely more expensive, but you get a lot more life out of them. So I want to show you just a couple of examples of, you know, if we didn't use that square sanding disc, you know, how far could we potentially get with this, with making it look nice before, you know, we have to use something else. The finger grinder, again, works really well if you just want to knock a little bit of that weld off. If you like the radius that this gives you, you can sit there and you can just give it a little bit of a sand. It definitely knocks off a bit of material quite quickly. So I've used this lots for it, and I'll kind of show you now. Actually, we'll just do a little example. So you can see we have now knocked a lot of that weld back. Let's just try, you know, if we were to just use our traditional round one, this is 80 grit that I'm using right now. We could use 120. Let's actually just try 120 because it is that silicon bronze, it is soft. Okay, so we got our soft disc on here with our full 3-inch pad. So we're just gonna try and knock this down, but you're gonna see so you can see it's starting to work. We're already starting to burn that edge off because we can't really use any more of the material. It's not giving us a consistent, like, you know, unless I'm working this edge to try and go down kind of like this to try and feather that out, and I'm focusing more in the middle of the weld and then trying to feather the ends out to get that smooth transition. You know, we can come up on this side. So it's still working. You know, I'm cutting a groove a little bit. I'm trying to knock a bit more of that down, but you can still use this. It's just not really going to give you the best result. Like it will eventually, but you know, you're going to be sitting there for quite a while trying to knock these little areas that sort of have a low spot where, you know, that's the consistency of when you're welding. Versus, again, if we were to flip this around to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to do the same with this one with our little finger grinder. I'll just show you that we can knock it down. Okay, I don't want to take too much away. I don't want to dig into the material too much. And then on this one, we can use the same thing, but I'm just going to show you. Let's just go straight to our square. I believe this is a 120. We could hit it with a, actually let's hit one with an 80. I'll just trim this guy here now. So this is a brand new one, which is okay. Sacrificing it. So all I do is just cut them, and the biggest thing you want to try and achieve is getting that corner. You want to have that nice little corner so that when you're welding or when you're sanding it, those are your contact points. So you can see your surface area is a lot different to what you're using here. So, you know, we've got that hard edge on there. Well, if we come in with this guy and it's spinning, it's obviously going to flex up. So we're only using these material bits here. So it's going to take the material away, but it's going to be in a smoother process. So I'll stick her on. So we'll show you now. So you can see it's starting to take it. We'll come this way. And the cool thing is, so that's already giving us a really nice transition. But you can still use this guy to knock a bit of that weld down if you wanted to. You know, I put a bit of a build up there, so it's going to be a bit more than, you know, our traditional piece here. So I can show you this guy. And I like to use both sides, so I want to come on this way because that's going to be working my top section. Then when I come this way and work it this way, it's going to be taking my base section. So you can see that is now very nicely blended out. It's got a very even transition between the two. It's not taking away too much of that material because it's only making contact to these 4 points here. So versus if we're using this guy, it's using that whole section the whole way through. So I can show you again though. So we could use the finger grinder here. So we can just knock a little bit of this down. Okay, so we've taken a bit more of the material out of the guts of that, you know, kind of feathering out our edges. And just like that, very consistent. So similar to this, but just has a bit more radius to it. But the transition from the two materials is really, really smooth. So say we were going to take this material now and we were going to want to paint it and do some body work. Body filler is not a bad thing. I think a lot of people think it is. If it's applied properly, obviously it's going to be used very well. It's just the matter of thickness. So if you're trying to, you know, put a whole ton of body filler into something and sand it out and you're leaving a lot of material in there, that's when it is prone to eventually want to crack and pop up. The solvents come through. So the less body work that you have to put into stuff, the better. But everything's going to need a skim if you're doing a high dollar car versus not. Nothing's always metal finished. They'll always have a skim of filler over top of it just to get all those tiny little imperfections out. So having said that, if you wanted to, you could put a little bit in there. But to be honest, say we wanted to blend this, make it look really nice and shiny, I would high build primer this, you know, obviously etch prime it, high build prime it, block the high build off, lay our base coat down and our clear, and you barely have to have any material in there. You just know that it is got, you know, the same material that you're using in there, which is really cool. So usually after the process, what I would do is, you know, I'm happy with the result right off the grinder, or our little 90-degree air grinder there. So what I could do sometimes, and I like to do that, is I just use our little DA sander. And this has, you know, this has the back, but this still has that little bit of edge in there just to sort of feather it out. You can see how nice that transition is from the two materials. It's really clean, really consistent. Again, it would work the exact same if we wanted to do the top and you didn't want to knock off too much of that. That is going to help you sort of blend that transition along the top as well. It's just like, it seriously works so well. I cannot express how much I use this all the time. Like I literally every single day, no matter what I'm using, works again really well on round stuff. So if you don't have the fancy attachment for your grinder that has that flex, that sort of belt that flexes over for doing your stainless work, which I don't have and I would love to have one. Again, it's the same process. I would weld 2 bits of stainless together. I would use my little finger grinder just to take off the top of the weld, not the material on either side, just to take the weld off. Then sometimes, I explained before, there's a little bit of a kind of a soft spot right in that belt. So I usually use that soft bit just to kind of feather it out if I need to. So it's, you know, because this will take a lot of material off, obviously, because of how hard it is and, you know, that little wheel. So you can really use that there. But same process, so that would be eliminated. Then I'd come right over it with my square. I'd blend this out, go through a couple different grits before then I would use the red Scotch pad and then polish it. But same process. You can use it for blending for all that type of things. And again, you know, with this guy here, we've obviously used it, so there's not much material there. So again, if you wanted to still keep this one as sort of your finish, because, you know, now this was a 120 grit, but because we've obviously used it a fair bit, it's obviously knocked a lot of that grit off. So I would consider that going like, okay, it's probably more closer to 220. So if you wanted to blend a few more marks out, then you could easily use that again. Or if you want to just make that square that little bit smaller, you can just come back in here. You can trim these back out, put it onto the back side, boom, you got a new fresh corner to be able to help you. Works so well. I want you guys to try it. Go out, grab a few of your discs, make sure you get a soft backing pad, and you can use a 2-inch one. So again, this is your 3-inch, that's your 2-inch. Try using your 2-inch with it. Works so well on all materials, aluminum, stainless, mild steel, it works on all of it. I've used it on all of it. And the biggest thing with aluminum, if you are gonna be using it, is you can still put a little bit of wax on these. So I just use those cheap white candlesticks. I just run a little bit on that, and that just helps that aluminum not grab and wanna stick inside the paper too much. Again, if you're doing areas where you need to weld it again, you're gonna have to make sure it's very clean and you get all that wax out of there. So you wanna make sure you're doing that pre-paint, pre-polish, pre-everything. So now we're gonna show you guys a bunch of different applications that I've used this over the past, including the wire looms, the rear nudge bar or push bar that we built for Ben's Roadster as well, the fuel tank brackets that we made, as well as the little gussets that we made over top of the kick-ups for the race car. And as well as we will be putting in a little bit more of the needle scaler. I love texturing metal and kind of making it look like it's almost like a rough cast. I've used it for when I was repairing my 32 heavy axle, where there was the spring wear in it before I dropped the axle itself, as well as when I was making those nice tank mounts for Craig's 32. We used them on that because I was trying to make it look real porous and sort of a rough cast. We wanted to put all those components together, weld them, blend them out, and put this in to make it look like it was one piece of cast. So if you guys do want to learn a little bit more about this as well, let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of this video, and we will see you next week on Bennett's Customs when we're back on the radial flyer. We are getting a lot more done to that, and it's getting very close to that first startup, but I'm very excited to show you guys the wheels that we've put on this van, and I would happily say that I don't think anyone has actually done it. Prove me wrong otherwise, but I think we are the first ones to be able to put these wheels on a van like this, so it's very exciting to show you guys. So make sure you stay tuned next week. We'll see you then.
And after a few passes, you can really start to get that smooth. So after we just go over it with finer grit, I'm using 36, I believe, on this thing just to take the meat out, and then I'll drop it down. But yeah, basically that's just takes it right out, and you get a really nice finish.
Do my best to swallow all the things I've done. You break your back, but you still don't have bread. You won't go back on the things that you said. You bleed your heart out, and it takes every drop. You've come too far.
All right, so we are going to start to blend the welds that I've just done, and we want to make this obviously look like it is one piece. And what I am using right now is the finger little air grinder. This thing is amazing, and it's really good for just knocking the top of the weld off.
Now I'm gonna show you just that little area inside there, and we're just gonna buzz this over and I'll kind of explain what it looks like. So you can see now that that is gone. And it's not taking a lot of material off as well, like there's no dip or anything like that. Step 2 is I'm using an old sanding disc that I've obviously cut. This way, it's just making a little bit of contact. And because it is worn out, it's not gonna take a lot of material. It's just gonna help me sort of blend those out a little bit. Next step is using these little brown guys. And now we have our little soft corners. So you can see what I'm trying to do. And now I can run through. I can cut my square into them. So now I have 4 contact points, and these obviously have a really nice fold to them. So for curved places like in here, it's obviously going to work really well. And it works pretty fast in areas that obviously don't have a lot of weld. You don't want to be pressing too hard. You just kind of want to let the, you're just sort of trying to finesse it, and you're just letting the tool do the work. Kind of go over what tools I'm using in order to do this. It's very simple. I'm using just a flap disc on our little angle grinder. So I'm just using this on kind of an angle on both sides until they meet at a peak. I am then just following it with a little bit of 80 grit on our air sander. I could be using this instead of the grinder. And then this is the little square cutoffs that I use. So this is after the blending with our sanding discs. And then once that's finished, we then step into the needle scaler. I just want to kind of push it along this way, blend it out into the axle so it's finished, and then, once you see it, it almost looks like it hasn't been done. Perfect. Just like that. I'm going to show you before and after here. And what I'm doing is I'm just using a flap disc on a grinder to knock the top of this weld off, traveling clockwise, trying to knock it that way, and then again coming on this side, traveling clockwise to kind of take the material off this way.
And I used our little 90-degree air grinder with those little square cutoff ones. Make sure you try and use these. So that way I create a little point. And then on the bottom side, we have a nice radius, but at least there's a lot of material built in here so that this is now really strong.